Very good morning to you. Let's bring you this story now. The battle for the sale of tobacco products could head to court if government doesn't revoke its decision. British American Tobacco has given government till 10 a.m. this morning to lift the ban or face legal action. Well, the President, Cyril Ramaphosa, had initially said that tobacco could be sold during level 4. But the decision was later revoked. Now, for more on government's plans, presidency spokesperson Kusela Tigo joins me now via Zoom, and she talks to us from Johannesburg. Ms. Tigo, thank you very much for your time. Firstly, I want to start off with the question around the possible challenge on the lockdown itself. There is a grouping of a coalition of sectors, and they are saying that right now, we are told that we are in the state of disaster, but perhaps this is a state of disaster in name. In practice, we actually are under a state of emergency. Is that possible?
Good morning, Oli, and thank you so much for having us on the show. Perhaps let me start off by putting this context to say that from when the very first case of COVID-19 was confirmed in South Africa, government took a decision to act urgently, to act decisively, and indeed to act drastically. This was done to ensure that we save lives and we reduce the transmission of the coronavirus in South Africa. Now, needless to say, those measures have paid off. We have seen a reduction in the rate of transmission in South Africa, and we have indeed achieved what we call flattening the curve. Now, it's been 5 weeks down the line, and obviously frustration is setting in. The economic challenges that we face are very glaring, and we can understand that many of the measures that were undertaken by government have curtailed a number of civil liberties. Now, the challenges that are then being posed to government, we understand in this context, they are part of the very vibrant and robust democracy that we're in, and we will defend those as and when they arise. But just to make the point that none of the decisions that government takes are done so arbitrarily. We're a government that is committed to consultation. We're a government that is committed to being advised by scientists and other professionals in the field. And I think the decisions that we have taken reflect that. There's been a number of litigation that has been brought already during this lockdown period. And as and when such arises, government does defend it. So in the issue specifically, for example, on the issue of the cigarette ban, as it's called, I want to make a point early that both the President as well as Minister Dlamini Zuma, they act on the basis of a collective decision. So when the President announced that the prohibition on the sale of tobacco would be lifted on the 23rd of March, sorry, was it 23rd of April? That was based on the information that the National Command Council had at that particular time.
Can I pick up on that point then and interrupt you, Ms. Tigo, and ask you the question, why did the President feel it necessary to make special mention of the possible lift on the ban of cigarette sales?
Well, if you remember the context of that particular address to the nation, Oli, it was preparing the country for a level 4 lockdown, which would then kick in on the 1st of April. Now, the President would have outlined a number of things, including exercise, including the resumption of economic activity, and indeed including whether the prohibition on the sale of cigarettes would be lifted or not. It was the decision that the National Command Council would have taken at that point. In the very same address, the President spoke about the fact that sectors will be consulted, members of the public will be consulted, and based on their views, then the draft regulations would be finalized. And once that had been done, Minister NDZ, indeed based on a collective decision of Cabinet, then announced the view that that particular prohibition on cigarettes would not be lifted. This is because of the submissions that were raised and the advice that we continue to get from various bodies, including the World Health Organization. So I'm putting it out there to say that obviously there's going to be missteps along the way. All of us are, operating in uncharted, unprecedented times. And it's really important that as and when these issues arise, government is committed to listen to consultation and to change its mind when it's necessary to do so.
Very quickly then on this point, Ms. Tigo, I want to touch on other issues. The argument out there, though, is that as much as what you are saying is perhaps correct in your eyes as government, that these are these are decisions that are taken by the collective, that is cabinet. The argument, though, is that the president's word, once articulated publicly, it ought to be final. And therefore, some are raising the issue that his authority has been undermined.
There is nothing that is further than from the truth. As I indicated, the President and all ministers in Cabinet act on the basis of collective decisions. There is absolutely no reason why the President or the ministers should not and cannot change their minds on any particular matter once there is information that comes to light which seeks to suggest a need for a review. And this is exactly what happened on the issue of the cigarette ban. The President announced a view on the draft regulations that were put for public consultation, and during that process of public consultation there was a very, very strong feeling amongst many members of society, including our scientists, that lifting the tobacco ban would not be helpful in the fight against COVID-19, not only because of the dangers that it poses to the risk of transmission, but also the fact that you would not want to now create a situation where people are going to shops, you're limiting and the movement that we want. Now, these are all issues that are going to be ventilated in the correspondence that the presidency will be sending through in response to the letters, in fact, government rather, in response to the letters that have been sent by this matter by interested parties.
Yeah. Ms. Digo, then I want to touch on this particular matter, and it is about whether President Ramaphosa is absolutely convinced that the lockdown is still the best way to handle the outbreak of the coronavirus. And I ask this because there is the argument that says the lockdown is simply prolonging the stay of the virus in communities.
The lockdown was never intended to eradicate the coronavirus. What the lockdown sought to do was to limit the rate of the spread of the virus. Flattening the curve means that we're saying that it must take a longer time for more people to be confirmed with the virus, and so that to help our health system cope with the burden that is likely to be put on it as a result of people being confirmed with COVID-19. So what we are seeing is demonstrable of the fact that that particular strategy has worked. In fact, South Africa is lauded for having taken decisive action to flatten that curve and indeed ensure that our systems are capacitated to handle the challenges. Yeah. I think the Minister of Health is on record having said that we're still a long way from the peak. It's probably going to get a whole lot worse before it gets better, but the lockdown has been extremely successful in achieving what it needs to do. And this is the reason why we're saying, even as we go into alert level 4, we need to ensure that people still continue to maintain the principles that have been set out. These include issues such as wearing masks when in the public, social distancing. It is those measures that South Africans need to take, which are going to ensure that when ultimately the peak is reached, we're able to handle it and our health system is able to cope.
All right. A final question to you, Ms. Digo. There is a raging international debate at the moment about the origins of the coronavirus. There are some who say it was manufactured in a lab in Wuhan. The WHO is adamant that this virus is natural. Where do we stand as a country?
Well, South Africa has taken a decision not to enter the fray on the origin of the coronavirus. We do this because we believe that now is not the time for grandstanding, now is not the time for posturing on geopolitical interests, but it's a time where all of the world should be uniting against this common enemy, which is the coronavirus. So South Africa and the continent, through President Ramaphosa, as chairperson of the African Union, has pledged its unwavering support to the World Health Organization under the very steady and solid leadership of Dr. Tedros. We have no doubt that as things unfold, as we deal with this virus and beyond corona, there'll be sufficient time for even greater transparency and accountability on the issues. But right now we have a common enemy, and that is where we need to focus our attention.
Kusela Digo, I thank you very much for your time. She speaks for the presidency of South Africa. Here's a look.